Rich people don't just do different things. They avoid different things. And what they never do is just as important as what they always do. In this video, I'll reveal 10 things wealthy people refuse to do, and why avoiding these same things will accelerate your path to wealth. This is how rich people think differently, and how rich people stay rich. Thing number 1 rich people never do. They never trade time for money long term. Rich people understand that time is the only non-renewable resource. You can make more money. You can't make more time. So they refuse to build their wealth on a model that requires their constant presence. They don't work hourly jobs forever. They don't stay in careers where income stops when they stop. Instead, they build assets, systems, businesses that generate money without consuming every hour of their day. Poor people trade time for money their entire lives. Rich people trade time once to build systems that pay them forever. The shift is simple, but most people never make it. They stay comfortable in the time for money trap and wonder why they never break free. Here's what rich people know. If your income requires you to show up every single day, you don't have wealth. You have a job, even if it's a high-paying job, even if you love it. If you stop, the money stops. That's not freedom, that's dependence. Rich people build differently. They create leverage, rental properties that pay them while they sleep, businesses with employees who generate revenue without them, investments that compound, intellectual property that earns royalties. They design their wealth to grow independent of their time. And that's the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Thing number 2 rich people never do. They never wait to invest. Poor people wait until they have enough money to invest. Rich people invest first and figure out the rest later. They understand that waiting is the enemy of compound growth. Every year you delay investing is a year of returns you'll never get back. Rich people start investing immediately, even small amounts, because they know time in the market beats timing the market. Poor people say, I'll invest when I make more money, when I pay off my debt, when I feel ready, and they're still saying it 10 years later. Rich people say, I'll invest now and adjust my lifestyle around it. They prioritize assets over appearances. They'd rather own stocks than wear designer clothes. They'd rather build equity than drive luxury cars they can't afford. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't need a lot of money to start investing. You need the discipline to start. Rich people understand that building wealth is a behavior before it's a number. They invest 10% of their income no matter what, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels small, because small investments compound into massive wealth. While poor people are waiting for the perfect moment, rich people are compounding. And in 20 years, the difference is millions. Not because they had more money, but because they started sooner. Thing number 3 rich people never do. They never buy things to impress people. Rich people care about net worth, not looking rich. Poor people care about looking rich, not being rich. That's why you see people driving $50,000 cars, living in apartments. That's why you see people wearing $1,000 shoes, but can't cover an emergency. Rich people understand that every dollar spent on status is a dollar not working for them, so they drive older cars. They wear simple clothes. They live below their means, not because they're cheap, but because they're strategic. They're playing a different game, the game of wealth accumulation, not the game of wealth signaling. Here's what poor people don't realize. The people you're trying to impress don't care, and the people who do care aren't worth impressing. Rich people know this, so they stop performing. They stop buying things to prove they're successful. They buy things that serve a purpose, a reliable car, a comfortable home, quality tools, but nothing for show, nothing to signal status, because real wealth is invisible. It's in investment accounts, in businesses, in assets, not in closets and garages. Poor people spend money to look rich. Rich people spend money to become rich. Choose your game. Thing number 4 rich people never do. They never ignore their numbers. Rich people know exactly where their money goes. They track income, they track expenses, they track net worth, they track investment returns. They know their numbers better than they know their own birthday. Poor people avoid looking at their finances. They don't check their bank account. They don't know what they spend. They don't track debt. And they definitely don't calculate net worth. Because looking at the numbers is uncomfortable. It's easier to ignore. But ignorance isn't bliss. It's poverty. Rich people embrace the discomfort of numbers because numbers don't lie. Numbers tell you exactly where you are and what needs to change. Here's the shift. What gets measured gets managed. Rich people manage their money. Poor people hope their money manages itself. And hope is not a strategy. Every month, rich people review their finances. They see what's working, what's not. They adjust. They optimize. They make data-driven decisions. Poor people make emotion-driven decisions. They spend when they feel like it. They save when they remember. And they wonder why they're broke. Rich people aren't smarter. They're just more intentional. They treat their finances like a business. And businesses that don't track numbers fail. So do people who don't track theirs. Thing number 5 rich people never do. They never stop learning. Rich people are obsessed with growth. They read constantly. They take courses. They hire mentors. They invest in education that produces returns. Poor people stop learning after school. They think education ends with a degree. Rich people know education is lifelong. And the best education isn't in classrooms. It's in books, in conversations, in experiences, in failures. Warren Buffett reads 500 pages a day. Bill Gates reads 50 books a year. Elon Musk taught himself rocket science. Rich people understand that knowledge compounds just like money. The more you learn, the more you can earn. Poor people consume entertainment. Rich people consume information. Here's what most people miss. Your income is directly correlated to your learning. If you're not growing, you're not earning. Rich people invest in books, courses, coaching, masterminds, not because they're bored, but because every insight can unlock massive value. One idea can 10x your business. One strategy can save you years. One connection can change your trajectory. Poor people say, "I can't afford that course." Rich people say, "I can't afford not to take it." Because they know the ROI on education is infinite. You pay once. You earn from it forever. That's the mindset shift. Thing number 6 rich people never do. They never surround themselves with broke people. Rich people are ruthless about their circle. They spend time with people who challenge them, inspire them, push them. They avoid people who drain them, distract them, pull them down, because proximity is destiny. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If your 5 closest friends are broke, you'll be broke. If they're wealthy, you'll be wealthy. Rich people know this. So they audit their relationships. They invest in new connections. They join masterminds. They attend events. They put themselves in rooms where they're the least successful person. Because that's where growth happens. Here's the brutal truth. Most of your current friends won't support your growth. Not because they're bad people, but because your success makes them uncomfortable. It exposes their lack of action, so they'll discourage you. They'll mock your ambition. They'll call you obsessed. And if you listen to them, you'll stay broke with them. Rich people leave people behind. Not out of arrogance, out of necessity. Because you can't soar with eagles if you're surrounded by turkeys. Upgrade your circle. Upgrade your life. It's that simple. Thing number 7 rich people never do. They never work without leverage. Rich people refuse to do things that don't scale. If it requires their time and can't be multiplied, they don't do it. They use leverage. They hire people. They use technology. They delegate. They automate. They build systems. Poor people do everything themselves. They think it's faster, cheaper, better, and they stay stuck doing $50 an hour work when they should be focusing on $5,000 an hour work. Rich people understand their time has a value, and anything below that value shouldn't be done by them. So they pay others to do it. They invest in tools to automate it. They eliminate it entirely if possible. Here's the mindset. Your time is your most valuable asset. Protect it ruthlessly. If you're doing tasks that someone else could do for $20 an hour, you're wasting your wealth-building capacity. Rich people focus on high leverage activities, strategy, relationships, vision, deals, creation. Everything else is delegated. Poor people mow their own lawns to save $50. Rich people pay someone $50 so they can focus on activities that generate $5,000. That's leverage. And leverage is how you scale wealth. Without it, you're trading time. With it, you're building empires. Thing number 8 rich people never do. They never ignore opportunities because of fear. Rich people feel fear and act anyway. Poor people feel fear and freeze. That's the only difference. Rich people don't have less fear. They have more courage. They see an opportunity, they calculate the risk, and they move. Poor people see an opportunity, imagine everything that could go wrong, and stay safe. And safety keeps them poor. Rich people understand that the biggest risk is not taking risks. That playing it safe is a slow death. That regret is more expensive than failure. So they act, they invest, they start businesses, they make moves. And yes, sometimes they fail. But one success erases 100 failures. And they know it. Here's what poor people don't realize. Every wealthy person has a story of taking a risk that terrified them. The job they quit, the business they started, the investment they made, the leap they took. And that leap changed everything. But they had to take it. Rich people don't wait for certainty. They create it through action. Poor people wait for perfect conditions. And perfect never comes. So they stay stuck, waiting, watching, wondering, while rich people are building, failing, learning. Fear is not the enemy. Inaction is. Feel the fear. Do it anyway. That's how rich people think. Thing number 9 rich people never do. They never think short term. Rich people play the long game. They make decisions based on where they'll be in 10 years, not 10 days. They delay gratification. They compound. They build. Poor people think short term. They optimize for today, for this month, for this year. And they sacrifice their future for temporary comfort. Rich people do the opposite. They sacrifice temporary comfort for future freedom. They invest money they could spend. They work when they could relax. They build when they could coast. Because they know that every short-term sacrifice is a long-term gain. Here's the math. $1,000 invested at 20 years old is worth over $10,000 at 60. $1,000 spent at 20 is worth 0. Rich people see this math and invest. Poor people see this math and spend anyway. Because delayed gratification is hard. It requires vision, discipline, patience. Most people don't have those. So they stay broke. But if you can master delayed gratification, wealth is inevitable. It's just a matter of time. Rich people understand this, so they wait, they build, they compound. And 20 years later, they're free, while everyone else is still working. Thing number 10 rich people never do. They never stop once they succeed. Rich people don't retire. They reinvest. They build bigger. They play bigger games. Poor people dream of retiring, of stopping, of doing nothing. Rich people don't understand that mentality because they love what they built. They're energized by growth. They're addicted to creation. So they never stop. They just shift. They go from building wealth to building legacy, from making money to making impact, from success to significance. Rich people understand that the game doesn't end when you win. It just gets more interesting. Here's the final truth. Rich people stay rich because they never stop thinking like rich people. They never stop learning, never stop growing, never stop building. Poor people think wealth is a destination. Rich people know it's a lifestyle, a mindset, a way of operating in the world. And once you adopt that mindset, you can't go back. You can't unsee the game. You can't stop playing. So here's the question. Are you ready to think like rich people? Are you ready to avoid what they avoid? Are you ready to build what they build? Because everything you need is in this video. The only question is, will you apply it? Next week, I'll show you the exact morning routine of self-made millionaires. The habits they do every day but compound into wealth. If this video opened your eyes, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And remember, rich people don't just do different things. They avoid different things. And now you know what to avoid. Welcome to Wealth Systems.